I'm wearing the same suit as I had in the picture. I just realized that now. So first of all, it's a pleasure being here and a true honor to be able to share some unique insights with all of you today. For those of you that have had the opportunity to be at one of my presentations, I always start with a few questions. So if you can answer these questions, you don't have to write them down, you can just think about them. I'd really appreciate it. So I always call these questions food for thought. So the first question I have for you is, we're gonna be understanding 5 markets in Asia. And I'm wondering if you guys can guess the growth in subscriptions from 2020 to 2024 in 1% in South Korea, Japan, India, Indonesia, and Thailand. Could be 1%, it could be 10%, could be 30%, whatever you guys think. Maybe just think of the number and you will see the number come up in my presentation. Okay, ready for question 2? Question 2, in South Korea, among premium VOD users, how much time on their phone, on their mobile, do you think they spend watching premium VOD? Okay. And the last question is, in South Korea, how many unique movies a month do you think the average premium VOD user watches? Okay. All right, are we okay with those questions? I'm gonna go on to the next slide. So I get the fortune of working with many of you in the room today, as well as the people creating the OTT category. And the question that I get most often in every meeting I have with them is the following. What is the current state of the OTT category in Asia? And I tried to summarize it because this is gonna be the story I tell you guys. I tried to summarize it in one very long sentence. And that sentence is this. We believe that the OTT category has evolved from emerging to established. And it's seeing steady growth, and we believe that growth will be it for the foreseeable future. But there is heightened competition, not only from OTT or VOD itself, but the fast-paced digital landscape. So, sorry for the very long sentence, but I believe this is the best summary that we can think of to explain the category from a macro point of view. Now, I don't get the luxury of showing you guys great trailers or great pictures. I have to show you guys a lot of data. So I think it's important you know where this data is coming from. So this data is coming from one product that we have called AMPD Vision, and we get the ability to track people's viewing behavior. It's real people, and they're sharing their viewing behavior with us. And we also have a quite unique research approach that we do. It's qualitative research, quantitative research, different modeling, different methodologies, but this is how you guys are gonna see all of the data coming up. I just wanted to be transparent in how this data is coming. So if you go back to question number 1, what was the growth from 2020 to 2024? The answer is about 20%. So the streaming category was growing 20% a year in those 5 markets. And you can see each market has its own story. South Korea grew from 8 million subscriptions to 23 million in that time frame. COVID was a very big push. India, you can see, and India is gonna ruin every single chart I make because the scale is so big, but it went from 50 million to 124 million. And Indonesia went from 9 to 22, and Thailand went from 5 to 14. And Japan is the one that has single-digit growth. Japan was a very established market, and it had about 8% growth every year. So, did anyone guess 20%? Was everyone higher or lower? Higher, you said? Okay. So, I believe we had a very interesting presentation from Joshua about the product adoption curve. So when you think about the category evolving from 2020 to 2024, it was actually going from very much early adoption in markets like India, Indonesia, and even Thailand, where household penetration, so the number of unique households that had premium VOD were 6, and 15%. And in 2024, it got very interesting. It went from early adoption to some sort of majority phase, whether it's the early majority or the late majority. Markets like South Korea and Japan had more than 40% household penetration of premium VOD. And you can see Thailand doubled. And even a market like India, which I'll talk more in details about, has 10%, and Indonesia 13%. So the category experienced very, very fast growth from 2020 to 2024. But the story is going to slow down a little bit. You can even see that from 2025. So from 2024, if you remember, the markets were growing at an average of 20% a year. South Korea is expected to grow 10% this year and 4% for the next 5 years. And Japan is going to experience very similar steady growth, 5 and 4%. I'll skip India for a second, and Indonesia and Thailand also very similar. So the category really went from very accelerated to now steady, consistent growth. And India is just experiencing super hyper growth. And if you exclude India, the category is going to experience about 5% growth a year on subscriptions. Now, this slide really surprised me when I created it, which is very interesting. If you look at each market has its own story. And its own story is, number one, there's not one category leader that is the leader in two markets. In South Korea, it's Netflix in terms of subscriptions. In Prime Video, in Japan, it's Prime Video. In India, it's Jio. In Indonesia, it's Video. And in Thailand, it's True ID. And you can see that global players, regional players, local players all play a very big role in the industry. But I was very surprised to see that not one player was dominant in two markets. So that was very interesting. And then also, the only one that shows up in the top 5 in all of these 5 markets is Netflix. So it just shows you that oftentimes we talk about Netflix or Amazon, where I used to work before, but actually you can see that each market has its own diverse story. So I talked a lot about the subscriptions, but revenue is also a very big thing. The category went from, reached $12 billion in 2025. That's 3x, so 3 times as much as it had in 2020. And you can see the revenue growth here for each market. So Japan is by far the biggest, so with almost $7 billion of revenue a year from premium VOD, which includes SVOD and AVOD. Korea and India are very similar. And then you see the more emerging markets like Indonesia and Thailand also there. But it experienced very high growth. And I believe TVing shared this, as well as other presentations today. Ads are going to play a very, very big role going in the future. So out of that $12 billion of revenue, actually 22% of that came from AVOD in 2025, or some sort of advertising on those platforms. And you can see the share. Each market, again, has its own story. A market like South Korea, the AVOD, or the advertising revenue, represents 11%. But if you look forward to 2030, you're going to see that AVOD is going to play a much bigger role. It's going to go from 20 to 30%. And a market like India, which had 40% of its revenue coming from AVOD, now more than half of it will be coming from advertising. So we got a specific request to talk about India. So I don't know here, has anyone here heard of the company GeoStar? Okay. So Jio is actually a very big conglomerate company in India, and they have a telco business that in 2016 decided to give free data to all of India. And it's actually called the Jio effect. So for 1 year, pretty much 1 year, they gave free data to everybody, and then in 2017, they decided to charge very minimal for it. So data in India is actually very, very cheap now, thanks to Jio. And that is actually what really helped drive the VOD growth in India. So now I have another interesting data point, but I didn't ask it as one of the questions. There's actually 600 million people in 2020 that had a mobile phone, that had access to 4G. But that's only 45% of the penetration. And 26 million households, only 8% of households in India have access to broadband internet at their house. In 2025, you can see that number grows to almost 900 million people. But that's only 60% of the population. And in terms of households, only 16% of households in India have broadband internet. And what we project in 2030 is more than 1 billion people will have internet on their phone, but still only 20% of households, so 1 out of every 5 houses will have internet at home. So when we were asked why the VOD category was growing, if you remember those numbers, it was like 100 million subscriptions. That's because you're talking about now 900 million people that have access to internet. And it's not only the access to internet, that is the infrastructure, but it's actually 3 key things that I believe were the key drivers in India. Number 1 is the right IPs, number 2 is localization, and number 3 is the accessibility. So here, I think when we talk about very big sports, we might think of something like the World Cup in football. But actually, there's a sport in India that is huge. The Indian Premier League, which is cricket, had 650 million viewers on the Jio network. And on average, according to Jio, they had 170 million daily active users during the IPL only on digital. So if you have the right IP, people are going to be willing to pay for it. Another big thing is India has a lot of languages, right? So localization and regional content is another big factor. In India, they say there are about 40 million affluent users. And then you start to go into the A tier, the B tier, and the C tier. But the B and C tiers don't speak Hindi. So that's when platforms like Amazon and even Netflix started to create what they would call regional content. And that regional content also helped boom the growth of India to go into those B and C tier cities. And then finally, a big innovation was about the product. We heard today about the mobile tier. So actually, in Prime Video, when I was there, India was the first market to ever launch a mobile-only plan. Netflix did the same thing. And then MX Player, I don't know if you guys know, this platform is huge. It's a free AVOD platform. So by having the right product, different tiers, different advertising, India was able to boom. So now if I go back to the second part of my presentation, now we have a macro idea and the competition is getting more and more intense. So if you remember question 2, what percentage of overall time do users spend watching premium VOD? So actually, in South Korea, in the month of September, people spent 30% of their time on YouTube and TikTok. Okay, next, I'll talk about 4 or 5 other categories. Social media was about 19%, browsing the web, communication, gaming, and entertainment. And premium VOD on their phone is about 6% of their total digital time. Did anyone guess 6%? Did everyone guess higher or lower? Higher? So even if you include living room devices, which let's say is half of their time, and if you include, actually, if you heard TikTok and YouTube today, 50% of their time are also on living room devices, these proportions don't change so much. And not only that, this trend is the same across all of Asia. If I had the same chart for Japan, it's the same. If I have it for Indonesia, it's actually even more YouTube and TikTok. But it's the same everywhere. So VOD is a very selective part of people's day, but it's a premium one. And then now there's another big trend. So we started to hear about short, micro, right? So micro dramas have gained huge traction in the last 2 years. And sorry for this very dense slide. There's one player that's done very well across all markets, and that's DramaBox, right? But the interesting thing about micro dramas is that they have been able to target different people in different markets. Let's say in a market like Japan, they're targeting females 35 to 55. And here in South Korea, actually, the biggest growth recently has been from the 50 to 60-year-olds. And in Thailand, it's targeting Lakorn, which is kind of like soap operas, like Thai soap opera fans. And you can see that this category is growing, and it's going to grow fast for the next 5 years. So microdramas is another external competitive threat to VOD. But now if we look within VOD, and I hope this is one of the interesting slides for you guys, it's also very, very intense. So when we talk about competition, there are kind of 3 main decision points that I believe exist in VOD. So number 1, you have to think about what platform you're going to subscribe to. So right now in South Korea, the average user pays for 2.2 subscriptions a month. So out of the many platforms that exist here, and this is similar across all the markets again, you're going to have 2.2 subscriptions per user. Now out of that, you have to decide what title you're going to watch. Now in a market like South Korea and in a market like Japan, you have about 17,000 titles to watch every single month. And from there, you're going to have to decide where you want to watch it. Because here in South Korea, you see that 30% of the content in the top 10 are exclusive. So that means that 7 of the top 10 shows can be seen across multiple platforms. And so out of those 17.5 thousand titles a month, in Korea, the average user watches 5.8 unique titles a month. And in terms of movies, which was my third question, it's 2.6. So if you think about it, the average user is only watching 0.03% of the titles available to them in the market. And these numbers don't change so much in Japan, for example. They watch about 8 titles a month. Did everyone think you had more movies or less? More? So the people's time is very selective, right? And their watch list is very selective. So out of those 5.8 movies, 5.8 unique titles, 2.4 of them come from South Korea. And these are usually your bigger dramas or reality or variety shows. In Japanese content represents about 1 title a month for the average user. And that's usually your anime title. US content for the Korean user usually represents about 1.7 titles. And this is definitely skewed to movies. And then finally, Chinese content, where we had WeTV present earlier, represents about 0.2 titles. So you have very intense competition, not only for people's time, but even if you're going to make a great Korean show, like Take One, as we saw before, people are only going to watch 2 Korean shows a month. So title exclusivity, as I said, only 30% of the titles are exclusive. And you can see, in the month of September, Netflix had 80% of the top 10 shows. TVing had 50, Wave had 50, Coupon Play had 40%. So this is only for 10 shows, but you can see that there's huge overlap among them. And where it gets very interesting is, like, for example, for Bon Appetit, Your Majesty, 62% of the people that watched it on Netflix, and 40% watched it on TV. And if we take another show, I Am Solo, actually 40% of people watched it on Coupang, 27% watched it on Netflix, 16 on TV, and 12 on Wave. So it's actually very spread out everywhere. So I'll try and run through quicker because I see the red light flashing at me. So finally, title availability doesn't mean you're always going to watch it there. Now this is actually very interesting. Netflix users, okay? People that have a Netflix subscription or watch Netflix, 66% of them watched Bon Appetit, Your Majesty on Netflix. But 34% of them, even though they had Netflix, watched it on TV. So it's actually crazy. And TVing is not so different. Actually, TVing users, 70% of the users on TVing that had TVing watched it on TV, and 29% watched it on Netflix. So going back and trying to summarize quickly, VOD growth will continue to grow. And I believe TVing had mentioned it before, but we also believe that advertising will play a very big role, and India is definitely going to be one of the driving forces in terms of subscriptions. Number two, competition is very intense for digital free time or the attention economy, right? So 6% of people's time is on VOD. And you can see that short form content like microdramas, but specifically YouTube, TikTok, now represent a lot of people's time. And finally, audiences have many choices. So 2.2 subscriptions, 70% of the top 10 titles are shared. So people's time and money is very precious. So thank you very much. I hope this was insightful. Thank you.